a new lobby graphic can mean only one thing: a new DLC for Victoria 3, Charters of Commerce. This DLC practically turns the entire gameplay on its head, because we're getting a brand new world market mechanic. The old system simply no longer exists. The corporation system has been expanded. They can now produce unique prestige goods and grant companies special rights, such as owning their own country. Oh, and diplomacy has been reworked again. Of course, these aren't all the changes the rest you'll see in this episode, because there are a lot of them, and I can show them to you on release day, because Paradox is sponsoring this episode. Charters of Commerce is releasing today, June 17th, and starting this Thursday, the base version of Victoria will be free for a few days, so you can see for yourself whether you'll enjoy the game. And if you end up liking the DLC after watching this video, I encourage you to buy it via the link in the description and the pinned comment. Maybe then Paradox will pay me a bit more. So, welcome Imperialists, Lucas here. Just so you know, I'm playing on a non-final version of patch 1.9, so I might run into some bugs and exploits that you won't encounter. At least I hope you won't encounter them. And that's actually the main reason why I didn't pick Poland for my first playthrough. As you know, the Commonwealth is surrounded by 3 great powers, and each of them now has a defensive pact with the others, a 15-year one no less, which means these countries really love each other. And so in my test playthrough, even as time passed, that love endured, as did the defensive pacts. So now playing as Poland is a bit more of a challenge. That's why I picked Spain for my first run. And my goal will be to rebuild the Spanish colonial empire using the new mechanics, especially that insanely powerful company. The difficulty of playing Spain lies in the fact that we have very low literacy, which of course means we're behind on technology. A not so rich and not so happy society, just look at those faces. And I also have a lot of reforms to push through. Our 5-year-old Queen Isabella does support the intelligentsia, but the Catholic Church and landowners still have a lot of influence. But enough complaining, time to get to work. To start off, I'll take care of things that remain unchanged regardless of the game version. A good practice is to unpause and let a few days pass. That way I can see where technology is spreading on its own. And yes, that means I won't have to research it myself. I manually set empiricism as my first direction because it gives me an extra level of education institution. Then comes banking and the stock exchange. Meanwhile, lathes will be introduced automatically, which means I'll be able to research atmospheric engines without penalty. That is, the research time will be reduced because I'll already have the first tier technologies unlocked. Next step, politics. In the government tab, I add the armed forces because I'm trying to weaken the landowners, and the easiest way to do that is to implement dedicated police and remove local police. Local police increases the influence of landowners, while dedicated police is neutral. Passing this reform should be easy since it's supported by all the interest groups currently in my government. Next, I designate spheres of interest, and these have changed a bit in their function. I mark the Brazil and La Plata regions. Spheres of interest now primarily affect diplomatic actions in the selected region. If you don't have one, pretty much everything you see here in the diplomacy options will be grayed out. They also indirectly impact trade. In the previous version of the game, if a country was outside your sphere of interest, you couldn't trade with them. Now, you can trade with any country in the world, and spheres of interest affect a modifier called trade advantage. More on that in a moment. On the international diplomacy stage, I set my rivals, the Ottoman Empire, Greece, and the Italian states. I'll need quite a lot of influence points. Right now I'm already using 300 diplomatic points for the quadruple treaty. That's a defensive pact between 4 countries. So yeah, I won't be conquering Portugal anytime soon, since I also have a defensive pact with them, one that's best not broken for the next 8 years. But I do have those 8 years to improve relations with both the UK and France. That way, those great powers are less likely to get involved in my wars in South America or Africa. And I'll be having quite a few of those. I raise taxes and temporarily increase the grain tax as well because I want to trigger the grain law crisis. In theory, this should lead to an event where I get an agitator from the landowners who is actually a supporter of the free market. In theory, because in my test game I didn't get that event a single time. And I don't see any specific conditions in the event itself, so I'm not sure if I'm doing something wrong. Then I move on to the Spanish Navy and start building a lot of light ships around 21 to bring the total up to 30. Next I go to Navarre. This is the area I want to focus on developing, and I build 5 construction sectors here. And since I'm an idiot and didn't use the Alt key, I now have to move them to the very top manually. I open the market tab and check grain to see if the actions I took were enough to get at least a plus 25% price increase. Minimum. And not really. So now I open the grain tab and apply maximum import tariffs. That way, no one will want to sell grain on my market. And I also apply additional subsidies for exports, meaning I'm paying for grain to leave my market, so grain will drain out. Oh, and I still need to bring the landowners into the government. So I temporarily add them, which successfully triggers the grain law crisis, and now I just have to wait for the event I showed earlier. Now I can cancel the extra grain tax, and in 2 months I'll restore the previous tariff and subsidy levels on grain, because I don't want people to just start dying of hunger. And now it's time for the new mechanics that affect Spain's further gameplay. The first and biggest one is the market and the management of the entire economy. In the previous version of the game, I would now spend about 10 minutes clicking through every good, setting up import routes if I lacked something and export routes if I had too much. Usually, I'd repeat that process off-screen every 2 to 3 years. Yes, it was extremely boring. Now that entire mechanic has been removed, and all trade happens automatically through the world market. Paradox even removed that fifth icon that used to represent trade. You can imagine the world market as a kind of overlay placed over all individual national markets. Or more precisely, it's a collection of all these national markets, unless a country like Japan has isolationism, in which case it obviously doesn't belong to the world market pool. In the Market tab, you can go to the World Market section, where you get a full list of all goods in the world, as well as their demand and production levels, including detailed information about who is supplying or demanding how much of each good. And I think the best way to understand how a particular good ends up on the world market is to start from the smallest unit. As I mentioned, the world market consists of national markets, and national markets consist of local markets in individual provinces. Let me use the example of plain wood to explain how this resource flow works. The tooltip shows this perfectly. We have a province, Navarre, the Spanish market, and the world market. Navarre has a surplus of 34 wood, and that wood is consumed locally first. The remaining surplus is then transferred to the Spanish market. Now, on the Spanish market, there's already a major shortage of wood, and besides that, the price of wood here is significantly higher than on the world market, which means we'll be importing wood. Yep, we have plus 100 trade center. Now let's flip the scenario using tobacco as the example. In this province, I have a surplus which flows to the national market, and there's a surplus there too. Only now will the tobacco flow to the world market, where there is a slight shortage. 30 units leave the national market and 30 units of Spanish tobacco appear on the world market. Why only 30? Let me explain. While the transportation of goods between a local province and the national market happens automatically, transport from the national market to the world market happens through trade centers, theoretically from the nearest province. This building is no longer constructed automatically, you can build it yourself in any province you want. As long as you have enough trade capacity, you can exchange any number of goods. In theory, of course, because now we also have that additional factor I mentioned before, trade advantage. But I won't cover it in detail in this video because it's a complicated modifier influenced by many factors. It really deserves its own guide and a lot more testing. In short though, the higher your trade advantage, the better prices you get on goods bought and sold. Which means people are more willing to trade with you, and you make more money. And this value is calculated separately for every trade center and every good in the world. One of the factors that strongly impacts trade advantage is your sphere of interest. But yeah, it only seems pretty complicated. We can also influence the export and import of goods through subsidies and tariffs. Tariffs, of course, are taxes that can be applied simultaneously to both imported and exported goods. And revenue from tariffs benefits the national budget. Subsidies are simply the opposite of tariffs. We can provide financial support for both imports and exports, which always negatively impacts our budget. And now I'll show you how this works using the example of beef, which is severely lacking in Spain. Currently, I'm making money from both importing and exporting beef, which isn't exactly ideal. Personally, I want to apply very high tariffs on exports so that it's not profitable for other countries to buy Spanish beef. And to encourage other countries to sell us their beef, I'll heavily subsidize imports, even by a lot. This might cause a supplier country to start investing in and expanding its beef farms because Spain buys a lot and even pays extra. After some time, I'll reduce the subsidies, and that should balance production and demand. I apply a similar strategy to artillery, which is also lacking on my market. A reverse example is hardwood. Here I impose massive import tariffs, making it unprofitable to sell hardwood to Spain. This protects local production by my own loggers, but I want to encourage other countries to buy this wood from me, so I'll subsidize exports. First, these will let my loggers earn more, and second, for instance, France might start buying that wood, which would make furniture production in French factories more profitable. That could lead France to build more furniture factories and start buying even more of my wood. Over time, I'll again reduce the subsidies, and that will help balance supply and demand. Tariffs and subsidies are excellent tools, especially effective in countries lacking certain resources. In the previous version of Victoria 3, to get a certain resource, you usually had to conquer a territory where it existed. Now I can just buy it. Wow, who would have thought you could do such things in an economic game? There's yet another way to acquire or sell goods that are on your market, and that's now possible thanks to the new diplomacy system, or more precisely, treaties. Because now the entire diplomacy system has been shifted into the treaty system, I'm specifically interested in the goods transfer agreement. And I know that Russia usually has a lot of wood and grain available for export early in the game. Although you have to be careful, if too much of a good is added and it exceeds either side's transport capacity, you get a massive penalty to the likelihood of finalizing the treaty. Naturally, I need to be careful not to import too much, or my own industries will suffer. In exchange for these resources, I agreed to accept a Russian embassy. I have a 100% chance that Russia will accept the treaty. I just need to set it to last at least 10 years. That's actually the minimum duration of the treaty. If both sides are satisfied, it may last longer. And if not, I can later renegotiate the terms. A very cool feature is being able to name the treaty yourself. And shortly after Russia agreed to everything, from what I've noticed, treaty goods appear in my country automatically, without needing trade centers. Only the fleet is used, but you need to wait a week for everything to be processed. Alternatively, that might be a bug, that the fleet isn't actually being used, since I know there were issues with this before. I'll just add that treaties can be a decent source of income for a given country. For example, right now Russia is buying goods from its market for 21,000 gold to supply them to the Spanish market. And it's selling them on my market for 26,000, which is a 5,000 profit. And the best part, I'm not the one paying for it, the Spanish population is. So I guess everyone's happy, right? Wait, what kind of outfit did they just adopt? Some kind of penitent robe or something? Anyway, let's keep playing. I feel like I've already explained too much to you. I'm sure you understood everything. In the province of Navarre, as usual, I'll start building my initial industry, so I'm enabling road maintenance here. It still speeds up construction. And the second edict goes to education. Then I assign 4 more education edicts, that's as much as my authority allows, in provinces with over 1 million population. That should help improve literacy a bit in Spain. Because right now, it's really terrible. Usually, it's also a good idea to go in and change production methods, but I can see that in the current version of Victoria, this has been tweaked, and at the start of the game, it's generally better not to change anything, only later, once new techs are discovered. Finally, I've established spheres of influence in Brazil and La Plata, so I immediately start a war to annex that one small country. I also hired generals. Of course, I prioritize all social classes, except landowners and clergy. The Anti-Corn Laws League. A new figure has risen in the ranks, the petite bourgeoisie, organizing an innovative pressure campaign in support of abolishing the corn laws. Thanks to this, I'll get a new free market advocate character in the bourgeoisie. The only problem is, it's happening in the middle class, not among the landowners. I really don't know what I'm doing wrong because I did it the same way before. Once the war breaks out, I immediately send my navy to perform a naval invasion with the smallest army. Despite some penalties, it'll still complete the task. To avoid the invasion penalty, I need 1 ship per 1,000 soldiers. It always amuses me how the fleet and army arrive separately. They really should move together. Beach assault. My opponents stand no chance. Total surrender. My next step is to make Argentina my protectorate. The same army is enough to win that war. In the previous version of the game, when conquering protectorates, it was worth also taking war reparations from them. This time I'll probably skip that, for 2 reasons. War reparations double the aggressive expansion and damage my relations with Argentina. And I want to improve those relations as quickly as possible after the war. So I limited myself to just military access, which will be useful in a future war with Bolivia. In the meantime, a group of military officers joins my pro-French front. Oh, Argentina surrendered without a war. Now they're my protectorate? And honestly, it doesn't benefit me that much. I'll aim to make Argentina my puppet as soon as possible. My next conquest target is Chile. There are huge gold mines here, so I want them in my hands. No way Chile surrendered without a war too. I'm really lucky. Now I just need to wait for my infamy to drop to around 10 points, because in the next war I'll gain quite a bit of it. Just taking Bolivia gives me 11, and in the meantime I'll conquer a few more countries. Regarding the liberal I got from the event, I'm assigning him as the leader of the entire bourgeoisie. And in his place, I've invited an abolitionist, because either way, I need to get rid of the voluntary forced labor. And just like I said, since infamy has dropped, I'm preparing for war with Bolivia. I intend to make Bolivia my protectorate and turn all of Bolivia's vassals into my own vassals. That will cost me 35 infamy points, not a huge amount, but every point makes my puppets more disloyal. The war has fortunately broken out, though I was taking a bit of a risk since I didn't mark the remaining vassals as primary war goals. And I'm starting my naval invasion, although I see a problem that's been there before. Let's see if Paradox fixed the bug I reported to them. The bug was that when my troops passed through puppet territory, they received the black flag, which is a new feature similar to the one from EU4 or Crusader Kings. And when troops have a black flag, they can't perform landings. In the meantime, I've researched empiricism and I immediately upgraded the education system by 1 level. Yes, Paradox fixed it, my army passed through and didn't get the black flag. I'm launching a naval invasion in northern Peru, which means Bolivia and its puppet armies can't help the army stationed there. Now I just need to win a few battles to establish a foothold, where I'll send in the rest of the army. Foothold established, so I'm sending reinforcements. Meanwhile, the mountain battles are in full swing. Bolivian troops are moving to the front, great, because I'm already launching a second invasion. And in the meantime, more support has arrived at the front line. After I'm done with the police laws, I want to deal with trade, or more precisely, free trade. I want to switch to it, which means I may stop profiting from tariffs, but I'll be able to give bigger import subsidies and gain trade advantages both in imports and exports. Mercantilism only gives me the export advantage. In this campaign, I want to build a modern Spanish economy that imports cheap raw materials from abroad and processes them into high-value products. After discovering Leidza, I'm of course switching everything to modern production methods, and the war in Bolivia is going exactly as I planned. Honestly, in this version of Victoria 3, it's much easier. Beautiful, war won. A nice bonus is that Peru is already my vassal. And soon 3 countries from this region will merge into one, which will also be my vassal. Then I should start earning more here. Still, I now need to spend a ton of diplomatic influence to improve relations with all these puppets. That means my infamy will drop more slowly, so my wars in southern Africa will have to wait. I know this opening strategy is basically standard now, but in the current version of the game it's even easier. That's because I can immediately focus on building the Spanish Navy, rather than spending time on building lumber mills. And honestly, after all those conquests, my next step is to form my own great power bloc. I'm debating between a trade league or a sovereign empire. A sovereign empire would allow me to collect additional payments from my vassals, an extra 25% plus authority, which I'd use for education. A trade league, on the other hand, is interesting for a different reason. First, I can invest in the internal market, which increases factory output, gives me more infrastructure, and offers greater convoy benefits, which I currently lack. As a trade league, I can also focus on trade itself. And look, I get a plus 25% global trade advantage, which is massive. And the extra bonus, ignore trade advantage penalty from interest, means I won't suffer the 50% penalty to trade advantage for regions that Spain isn't interested in. And combined with free trade, which gives me another plus 25%, Spanish merchants should have the upper hand everywhere. First though, I'll focus on internal trade flows and only then turn to external trade. There's just one problem, I'm failing to honor the pact with the Russians, which will result in it being broken. Oops! So I'll wait a bit before creating my great power block. But once I do, I'll follow the exact same plan. Alright, I'm going into debt for now, but I'm not worried about it. Spain is a major power, so the interest rates aren't high. Beautiful, free trade has been enacted. And that concludes my dispute over the Grand Laws, which will give me quite a few loyalists, 1,300,000 loyalists. That should make reforming the country a bit easier. I'll use this first to introduce per capita taxes, higher taxes, and the people are happy. Even better, during the public debate when I was introducing this tax, I got to support the intelligentsia. As for industrial development, I'm focusing on starting heavy industry in Navarre, you know, tools, steel, coal and iron mines. Later on, I'll be making trains there too, but I'm still waiting to unlock steel tools and then I'll get started with railways. Unfortunately, Navarre doesn't have much infrastructure, so railways are essential here. I also see I'm having issues with goods flow, that's why I'll go ahead and build trade centers. They're very quick to construct now. And honestly, it would be useful to get a notification when a trade center has reached its limit. I haven't mentioned this before, but trade centers also affect local prices since they supply raw materials to the province first, so it's good to spread them out. Although, the higher the level of a trade center, the better its advantage in acquiring goods. Okay, infamy has dropped, so it's time to move on to South Africa. I'll start with an invasion on the Zulu. The invasion, of course, went without major issues. Next, I'm taking on Transvaal and Oranje. Oh, this newly acquired province doesn't have access to my market because it lacks support. By the way, there's also been a major change in most buildings from the development tab. They now cost less to build and employ fewer people. Although I think the port might be an exception. For now, I'll also assign the riot suppression edict in this province because the higher the unrest, the slower the construction. I'm rolling out atmospheric engines everywhere now. Great! That'll increase my extraction of basic resources. And now the new tax system. So since I've got more money in the budget, I'm switching construction methods to iron frame buildings. I'll also take advantage of the moment while the social classes are happy and try to abolish voluntary forced labor. That will significantly weaken the landowners. Hopefully it doesn't end in a civil war. I also forgot to mention, as usual, I don't add the areas I conquer in Africa as states. Okay, I won't be getting tax income from those provinces, but I'll later introduce exploitative colonies. That'll boost the productivity of the mines and farms. After all, I conquered this whole area mainly for the gold mines. My next step after taking this part of Africa is to deal with my protectorates in South America. I want to turn all my protectorates into proper puppet states. Unfortunately, infamy slows this process down. I could also cause Brazil to collapse in the meantime, but sadly one of my protectorates would join the war on their side. Yes, protectorates have their own foreign policy. And from what I see, it'll still take some time before Charcas's autonomy drops. Meanwhile, a major civil war has broken out in France between the bourgeoisie and the clergy. France is calling me into that war, but I don't want to fight against Great Britain. Besides, I have to admit, I like this new government more. I'm also severely lacking iron. I'll try to find a country that produces a lot of it. I need so much iron that I could really use a trade agreement for it. Unfortunately, none of the major producers want to sign such an agreement, so I'll have to subsidize the imports. Oh no, my pro-French lobby has been disbanded because yet another French republic was formed. And this France counts as a new country, so it's time to establish new treaties. Might make a bit of money from that too. I managed to get rid of voluntary forced labor, and without a civil war even. That should raise my citizens' quality of life soon. Speaking of growth, I'm now building a lot of gold mines in Latin American countries. And all the profit from those mines will go straight to me. A few years have passed. I wanted to skip ahead to the moment where I turn my protectorate into a puppet state. Unfortunately, this will increase the independence aspirations of all my other subjects. And while I could now also turn Chile or Argentina into my puppets, it might lead to a rebellion from Charcas, since one of my rivals could support their independence movement. It's kind of like in Europa Universalis 4, so you have to be careful with that. 8,000 gold just from Charcas, nice. My puppets are finally starting to pull their own weight, I mean work for me. Now I'm planning to go to war with Brazil, so I need to upgrade my army, remove the cavalry since it's basically no longer necessary, increase infantry to 30 and artillery to 20. One thing that hasn't changed is that it's still crucial to deal as much manpower damage as possible. That bleeds out the enemy armies and makes it easier to break through the front. I'm moving all those barracks to the top of the construction queue. Building them is only the first step, you still need to train the army. Although I'll leave the railways as is, since I need them in several provinces. Meanwhile, a very cool event takes place, the moment of reckoning with voluntary forced labor. In both decisions, the landowner's ideology changes, but I can either forgive them or refuse to forget what they did. I want this social group to be as weak as possible. And finally, a very important technology because it allows me to found my first corporation, and corporations are even stronger now than in previous versions of Victoria 3. I'll found La España Industrial because it increases my innovation by 15%. In a moment I'll check whether it increases my cap or the points generated, since I don't remember. It also produces a prestige good. Prestige goods are special products that can only be produced by corporations. And according to what's written here, they replace the consumption of basic goods, meaning the basic good is pushed out of the market. We get a trade advantage when exporting them and higher production of those goods, all positives. Additionally, if we had any things that gave bonuses to our army, they'd also impact army quality. And here, as an example, I'll show you the Prussian company, which produces special cannons, making the Prussian army stronger in battles. But that's not all. because when we establish a corporation, we assign it all the buildings needed to fulfill its requirements. After that though, we can go into the corporation settings and assign it specific legal rights. And now I'll briefly explain those legal rights. Investment right allows the corporation to gradually build new headquarters. This way, part of the profits from companies in a given region will go into our national investment pool. This can also be done abroad, but requires a foreign investment treaty. Trade rights lets the corporation build trade centers. That one's the least useful since we still have to manage trade ourselves anyway. Colonization right. Honestly, I still don't fully understand this one, but in theory the corporation can take over a region from us for colonization and form its own state there. Industrial right lets the corporation build additional types of buildings, in this case specifically silk plantations, which I'm doing because it's profitable. The last right is the monopoly right, and it's the most powerful tool. If we assign a monopoly to the corporation, it will begin to purchase specific types of buildings from the Spanish market, ones it has monopoly rights to. And it doesn't matter if the buildings are owned by the state or by other companies. Whether the corporation owns those buildings from monopoly or construction rights, they all become its assets and generate profit. That profit is then divided, part of it goes to the state as dividends and enters our investment pool, and part goes to the corporation's own pool, which it uses to acquire or build new buildings. But that's still not everything we can do with corporations. Through the trade treaty option, we can expand their monopoly into other countries. Unfortunately, it has to be done separately for each building type. Then the corporation gets exclusive rights to construct that type of building on French territory, although first it will start buying up what's already on that market. At first, these will only increase the corporation's income, and maybe a portion of that will get reinvested back in Spain. But if we give the corporation the investment rights card and it can build local headquarters, that would increase Spain's investment pool, even though the factories are located in France. However, that's a task for later, not now. Right now, I want my corporation to reach maximum prosperity as quickly as possible, only then will it start producing prestige goods and give us its bonus. Prosperity now increases a bit differently than before. Its maximum level depends on the corporation's income, while growth depends on the average income of its individual buildings. So now I want to influence prices through the subsidy option on certain goods. From what I can see, the market price for fabric is very low, so it's worth influencing the market price of clothing by heavily subsidizing exports. Unfortunately, this is a bit costly, but it will speed up the entire prosperity growth process, although I'll still have some trouble with it. And there we go, the company will be able to reach maximum level soon. And when the corporation's prosperity is close to max, you have to start slowly phasing out the subsidies. You can't just cut them all at once, because that would basically kill your company's entire income. No, but this is growing beautifully, soon we'll hit 100%. And great, we've got 100%. Now my corporation can produce prestige goods, and we're getting the innovation bonus. I checked, we get a bonus to innovation produced, not to the cap. And look, my corporation immediately switched over to producing prestige goods. And this is actually the moment I'll found my own great power block, though I'll focus on external trade for now. I also noticed that the second level of this upgrade makes my trade centers more efficient. I got a new production method that increases their throughput by 50%. And at the third level of external trade, I completely eliminate the trade advantage penalty for not being interested in a region. So now I'm expanding my gold mines, then universities, and finally getting serious about producing more clothes. In the meantime, Sardinia Piedmont wants to sign a treaty with me. They basically want to buy a monopoly to produce my clothes in their country. You know what, I'll take it, why not? Meanwhile, there's a massive textile factory expansion going on in Valencia. I'm practically doubling my output. That's because through treaties, I want to supply clothes to several million Chinese citizens. If you look at the price of clothes in the Spanish market, I'll be buying them at around 30 per unit and selling them at 40 per unit on the Chinese market. In theory, because the price will definitely drop. It would be nice to have a tool that forecasts price drops like when choosing production methods. I can sell a ton of clothes, but I don't want to meet the entire demand for them because that would lead to a major price collapse. I have a feeling I'm going to make money on this. And after a while, thanks to my treaties, I actually am making money. I'm spending 220,000 and selling for 265,000. I could probably optimize it better, but I'm still learning. Oh, I need to build more ports. Back to the great power block, I noticed there's a new agenda available that gives us an additional company, and that could be very strong. Although I'll probably go with the standard construction option, since that gives us a new special company and I have a free slot. I also noticed something interesting. Prestige goods are not covered by trade treaties. I wonder if that's intentional or a bug. Signing treaties is definitely profitable, just look at how our income is rising. In the meantime, I passed the secret police law and leveled up the institution to level 4. That's because I want to use it to help pass the separation of church and state law. Well, at least partially. Unfortunately, the clergy didn't want to give up their power voluntarily and kept causing revolts. I'm also starting to have problems with the workforce, so I'm changing to the most efficient production methods. My second company, which is a construction firm in Navarre, is doing so well that I'm going through an industrial boom. For this company, however, assigning more monopolies, or rather, more rights, is already costing me authority points. That's because we have a limit on how many of these rights we can grant across all corporations. We can increase that limit mostly through technology. After separating the church from the state, I want to focus on introducing a new voting system, because then I might be able to get women into the workforce and children into schools. Okay, but enough of the good times. I'm making money, my GDP is really solid, my armies are ready, and honestly I'm the third greatest power in the world right now. Much better. That's why I need to destroy my nemesis Brazil, especially since all of my subjects are fairly loyal at this point and I could even annex them, but I'm not interested. Most of the population from those countries and territories has already migrated to my country anyway, so why bother annexing them? Brazil will be defended by the United States, I expected that, so this is shaping up to be a larger war. That's why I had to expand my armies, which are now marching to the front lines. From what I can see, the Brazilian forces are having manpower issues that blue bar. They only have about half their troops. And looking at their composition, it's mostly infantry and outdated at that, so it shouldn't be a problem. Yeah, famous last words. I am ordering both of my armies to push toward the Brazilian capital. Although honestly, I might just leave my puppets on that front, they already have the upper hand anyway. War has broken out, but not that one. Okay, my bad. This war. You can clearly see I have a massive advantage at the start. The enemy regiments, not only are there few of them, they're also not at full strength. The only place where my enemies really have an advantage is of course the navy. Unfortunately, I'm keeping my entire fleet back home for now. There's no point in sending it into these fights, because the US Navy is quite modern. They have monitors and armored ships while I'm still stuck with wooden ships. I'm only now researching the tech that will let me build better ones. Look here, the start of the battle. They only have half their forces. First free elections. Oh boy, I'm going to have an unstable government, but maybe I'll finally get to implement public schools. As for the war, well, it's not going as I had hoped. I've had to switch to a defensive stance now, I'll just hold the line, which in theory should reduce my losses. I have to wait for the United States to bleed out and drop out of the war with its 500,000 troops. Finally, now Brazil doesn't stand a chance. Well, almost. The game's bugged and won't move the front line forward. The funniest part is that I implemented a new education system faster than Brazil's capital fell. I don't know what bugged out, but I had to change the war goal just to conquer those territories. I couldn't occupy anything. But thanks to that, Brazil got partitioned. And in 5 years, I'll be able to turn each of those countries into my protectorates. I'll start with Ecuador, then New Granada and Venezuela. That way, I hope my power block becomes large enough to carry out the fourth reform. So far, I've implemented migration, construction, and foreign trade reforms. But I'm already the second greatest power in the world. Thanks to treaties and trade dominance, my GDP is skyrocketing and the country is run by women. What's still ahead of me though is naval expansion. Because I know the naval blockade system was completely reworked, but my navy isn't yet big enough to play any major role in upcoming conflicts. I hope you enjoyed what you saw today. If you did, don't forget to use the link in the description to add at least this DLC to your wishlist, although for me this DLC is more of a must-have. And if you enjoy Iberian countries, check out this EU4 episode where I play as Aragon and show you the perfect opening, plus a secret event that lets you gain a ton of territory with almost no effort.